Hello and welcome to MASHmouth, a podcast covering every single episode of the hit 1970s sitcom MASH. I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Ethan.
Ethan, welcome to the season finale of MASH and MASHmouth. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm so happy we're here. We've made it through another season. And this is our 50th episode because of our 2 bonus episodes. We have 50 episodes of a whole podcast. That's insane.
So fun.
I did not think we would make it this far. Like a year ago, it was such a struggle to produce this show, and I had no idea what I was doing with editing. And now I'm like, well, I can kind of make a show now, and that's pretty neat.
Yes, and thank you to all of our listeners who have stuck with us for 50 episodes of just us rambling about our favorite TV show. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for enjoying this show with us.
So, Ethan, I have to ask you, what are your top 5 favorite episodes of this season?
Okay, this is not in any particular order. And I have to say, anyone listening who goes back to these episodes and is like, you didn't really actually like that one that much. I'll be honest, these are just the ones that immediately stick out of my mind as good episodes. I have not curated the AFI top 100 movies of all time here. I'm just trying to name the ones that I remember liking. So, in no particular order, I have The Sniper, Dr. Pierce and Mr. Hyde, Deal Me Out, Crisis, and Carry On Hawkeye.
Are you going to ask me what mine are?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I'm very tired. Vanessa, what are your top 5 episodes?
Okay, so first of all, I have to say yours are good, but we have a variation. I feel like last season we didn't have a lot of variation in our top 5, but we do. So my favorite, in no necessarily particular order, were Hot Lips and Empty Arms, Kim, Divided We Stand, For the Good of the Outfit, and Deal Me Out. Those I remember all being top 5 for me, or 5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, For the Good of the Outfit, now I remember, is such a political episode, right? With a lot of commentary. I can see why that's on your top 5. That probably should be on mine. Realistically, we could do a top 10 or top 15. This is a really good season. Immediately what comes to mind, the only episodes that I straight up didn't like were Dear Dad 3 and Henry in Love. Those are the only 2 where I'm those would not be on the list. Even For Want of a Boot, I was thinking about putting on the list for a minute. But that episode's so wacky. That episode for me is no longer an episode of MASH. It's just an episode that I remember working on as a podcast episode because our conversation was so insane. And honestly, I might put up an extended cut of the For Want of a Boot episode because there is some wild stuff in there.
Patreon bonus content, if you will. Yeah, I think that this season, even the episodes that we didn't necessarily rate 5 out of 5, I think that they are still really strong MASH episodes. Those are the episodes that you would maybe, at least for me, maybe I'm just speaking out of my ass for myself, but those are the episodes that you would go to of be oh, this is what MASH is. You know what I mean? So I do think that this season had a lot of really good ones.
Yeah, last season, it was not this big list of every episode's great and really kind of defines the show really well. So that really speaks to how good this season is, that we have such a wildly different top 5. And I'm oh, your top 5 is really good. I wish that was my top 5. But whatever, it doesn't matter.
But honestly, a lot of your top 5 too, I would switch out on any given day that I am feeling a different episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe Divided We Stand, I would switch out for Carry On Hawkeye or something like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that that's a testament to how good this season truly was. But let's get into the final episode of this season called A Smattering of Intelligence. When 2 intelligence officers show up at the camp trying to get dirt on the other, Hawkeye and Trapper, of course, have to do some meddling and make their jobs even harder. So Ethan, what did you think about this episode?
Okay, so this episode, I have a kind of complicated thought on, because I just I found it confusing, I'll be real.
This episode was confusing.
I didn't know who these people were, if they were like legit or if they were like also scamming each other. Colonel Flag kept switching his like affiliation, and I understand that like that's the joke. I'm like, okay, but who does he actually work for? Is he like an actual agent, or is he just kind of like loopy in the head from like the helicopter crash? This other guy like also like counterintelligence? I don't know. I didn't sleep well last night, and I was like awake really early to watch this, and I did not sign up to watch Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy at like 8:15 in the morning. I will be honest. What do you think of this one?
You know, I felt the same. I think that maybe I was kind of just more on board for this episode than you were, because I'm familiar with Colonel Flag. We did talk about him in a previous episode, and we'll get into that. But yeah, no, I agree with you. This episode was just like confusing and just so weird. It just like kept going. It just like barreled through. I don't know. Like there was no pause in this episode whatsoever. I felt there was no like B plot. There was nothing that was not this, if you know what I mean. I don't know. Something about this episode was just like, there was no pause. It just like ran through. I don't know. It was so strange.
This was like, I haven't seen this show. It's before my time and before my classic sitcom watching. But this is what I imagine the Mel Brooks show Get Smart is, like every episode. Where it's just like, yeah, there's spy things going on, but the joke is that it makes no sense. I'm just like, this is like peak 70s humor to me. Of like, we're gonna get some serious men to do serious things, and it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it was definitely, I don't know. Yeah, like you said, like I said, it was just confusing. So, I mean, let's get into as much as we can about this episode, I guess. I don't know. It was so hard to take notes on this episode. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute, what's happening?
I didn't take any notes on this one. I was just trying to follow the plot. I'll be honest.
Okay, so it starts right off the bat. Hawkeye and Margaret are taking care of this soldier who broke his arm. And he is introduced as Colonel Flag, which I've said before. Colonel Flag is the most polarizing character in all of MASH, I would say personally, because people hate him in the MASH fandom.
Oh,
every
really?
time he shows up, people don't, like, if you go on the subreddit for MASH, people hate Colonel Flag and his episodes. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And then there's some people who think he's like hysterical. I personally love Colonel Flag, but I think that that's a really like hot take.
Wait, okay. We need to have like a genuine conversation about this right now. Is it every Colonel Flag episode, whenever he shows up, is it just this? Is it like a weird like plotty espionage thriller?
Basically, yeah. So Colonel Flag is this CIA agent. And that's discussed later on in the episode. But every episode that he shows up, you know that there's going to be like buffoonery happening. Because always trying to like get intelligence or basically like dirt on somebody in the camp, some happenings going on in the camp. Like it's basically this, but I would say a little bit more coherent in seasons like to come when he's in it. But definitely still like very much like this of just like, what the hell is he doing? What is he trying to do?
If this is a recurring thing, I could see why people in like the MASH subreddit and the existing MASH fandom as it is today dislike these episodes, because this one, and I can't speak for the future episodes, but this felt like a crossover episode for another show that doesn't exist.
You know what? That's so funny. That is so true.
Like, this guy comes in and he's like fully formed, like he's doing his own thing, and the MASH characters are just there to just kind of like observe him doing it. They don't really partake in the plot. They're just like, this guy's weird and he's barreling through our show, like our normal show about like army doctors, and he's here doing like a Get Smart Leslie Nielsen routine, and I'm just like, what is actually happening? I don't know.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird episode, but I would say that episodes in the future that feature Colonel Flag are done a little bit better, but still, he's always a nuisance on the camp. So I definitely understand why people don't like him, and his episodes are just like kind of kooky and crazy. So that being said, let's get back into the plot of this episode. So Colonel Flag had broken his arm, and right off the bat, you get that he is kind of insane because he is refusing any pain meds for his broken arm. And Hawkeye and Margaret are just like, all right, like, you're a psycho, but sure, I guess. And I thought that that was just a perfect introduction to his character of just like, no morphine for me. It's just like, of course Colonel Flag would refuse morphine for his broken arm.
I love how you're like, oh, of course this man would do that. And I'm like, who is this man? But yeah, I really like this guy's performance. I know that he's been on this show before as a different character, and we had a whole confused conversation about that, and it did not enlighten me, this episode, of like who this man actually is.
Okay, I understand why.
But his performance is really good. I like how like straight-faced and like the way that he talks like he's in a like 40s noir movie. Just everything is so serious, and he's got this like accent. It's like a funny performance, but everything around him is so like, again, he's in a different pitch than everyone else. He's not in MASH. He's in Colonel Flag Adventures of a CIA agent that crossed over with MASH.
So I think that's why I like Colonel Flag so much, because Edward Winter, who plays Colonel Flag, is so great in his delivery of the Flag character, because he's so ridiculous, but he's playing it so seriously, and I just absolutely love that. It just makes for such good comedy of just like, what is this guy? Who is this person? It's just so fun.
As confused as I was, I do think it's funny that as an audience member, I have no idea if he's real CIA or just insane. That's a fun concept. Before we transition to another like part of the episode, I have to mention that before Colonel Flag comes in, Hawkeye is, first of all, in this, like, Hawaiian shirt and cowboy hat, which is very Hawkeye. He hasn't had a lot of these crazy outfits lately, so it was, like, nice to see that again. But Hawkeye is, like, hardcore, like, hitting on Margaret. And to the point where I was like, oh, is that Margaret, or is that somebody else? Like, I'm so face blind early in the morning that I was kind of like, oh, is that just a different blonde nurse? It was kind of weird. What did you think of, like, him doing this?
I don't know. This is hard to say for me, because I feel like this is setting up for their relationship in the future. Their dynamic of Hawkeye is like kind of constantly hitting on Margaret, like, hey, like, date me, whatever, because he knows that she can't stand him. And that, like, you see that later on in the seasons. And I feel like that was so funny to see in this scene, because you get that so much later on of Hawkeye just being like, hey, Margaret, like, go on a date with me, or like sleep with me, or whatever. And Margaret's just like, oh, Hawkeye, like, get the heck out of here. Like, I'm not, you're like an annoying little brother to me at this point. Like, go away. And I think that that's just really cute. So yeah, so I kind of liked seeing that almost, because it wasn't super uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
If it's in the context that you're saying that it is, like, later on, it's not like harassment. They're just kind of like good friends who wouldn't know each other's boundaries at that point. But just seeing him like actually hit on her, he hasn't shown like interest in her that way, other than the fact that she's like a woman previously. So it was like a fun little like, oh, this is an interesting little twist on it, huh? But I'm kind of glad that this kind of thing moves forward, as long as it stays within like the playfulness and doesn't turn into anything like weird. That'll be fun to see.
Yeah, I think that it's like that kind of dynamic is definitely like amped up a little bit more in the seasons to come. And yeah, well, I don't want to spoil anything for you, so
okay.
we'll move away from that. But to go back to Colonel Flag, again, I'm sorry for our audience members, as if we're on a live show. I'm so sorry for our listeners who hate Colonel Flag, but we are going to be talking about him a lot in this episode. So Colonel Flag, after he gets his arm fixed by Margaret and Hawkeye, he goes to Henry and basically tells him that he's CIA, why he's there, all this kind of stuff. And he gives him this like list of fake names that he's also known by, like his aliases, right? And this is what I was talking about in Deal Me Out, where I was like, oh, it's kind of adopted by the fandom that this character in Deal Me Out, who Edward Winter played, was Colonel Flagg, actually. Like, this was just another one of his aliases. And it's funny because in an episode coming up in later seasons, Sidney Friedman says something about playing cards with Colonel Flagg, even though he was playing cards with this other character, technically. And it's just like a very, like, funny kind of thing.
That's really funny, actually. I fully thought, like, oh, this is a retcon thing. But you're right. They do set up this man has like 57 identities, and maybe just one day he was like, hey, I want to play poker and just be like a kind of normal guy for a few minutes.
Yeah, of course that's like a fandom thing where people are like, oh no, it's actually like, you know, Colonel Flagg and stuff. But I don't know. I like to think that. That's why I got so excited in that one episode where I was like, this is Colonel Flagg. And you were like, what are you talking about? No, it's not.
That's the kind of fan theory where I'm like, yeah, that is just canon to me. Like, you can say, like, oh, it's just a fandom thing. But, like,
no, canon.
that is fully, like, intended text for me. You don't hire the same actor to play two different characters within the same season and introduce the fact that this man has multiple aliases and not have that be the intended, like, Easter egg for people to go back and see, like, oh, this man was here before and he was under a different alias. It's awesome. I'm giving the writers credit here. They were intending that. That is Mr. Larry Gelbart. He had a grand vision for the plot of MASH, okay?
Oh, I just love that. That was like, and again, that's explaining why I was so excited and why you must have been so confused. So you're welcome. So, of course, while Colonel Flagg is talking to Henry, telling him that, you know, I'm going to be snooping around the camp, basically. Again, I don't really understand why he's there. I don't think that's ever really explained. Maybe I missed it, but I don't know. Like, he didn't really exactly tell Henry what his purpose was there. So, who knows? He's just like poking around camp, like, okay,
just being
we have
a weird
to get on
guy.
with the episode. Yeah, exactly. So Radar was, of course, listening at the door, and he goes to Hawkeye, Trapper, Margaret, and Frank, and he's like, yeah, guys, guess what? That Colonel Flagg, he was a CPA, meaning CIA, and it's just like, oh, Radar, like, you're such a child.
See, this also added to my confusion. I was like, oh, is CPA like a different term for CIA? Like, I don't know what any of these acronyms mean.
No, a CPA is an accountant, Ethan.
Oh my god. Oh my god. I am an idiot. I apologize.
That is so funny. No, you just pulled a Radar. You literally just pulled a Radar.
I am Radar.
The exact mistake Radar made.
There's a reason why in our cover art why I'm holding Radar's teddy bear. Because I am just the Radar of this podcast. Things are gonna go over my head, but I'll be weirdly perceptive about other things, you know?
No, I like that. I like it. It's all good. We're all good here. We love it. We love it.
We love idiots.
No. So anyway, Radar tells the group that this is a CIA agent, and Margaret and Frank are immediately, like, really into it. They're so excited, so happy that a CIA agent is here because they're like, that's so American. It's just like, oh my god.
And Margaret was also like, I saw him with his shirt off. So she's like,
I know, that was so weird. That was so funny where she was just like, wow, I got to see a CIA agent with his shirt off. It's like, okay, girl, like, congratulations.
And Frank is like insecure about it, but I'm like, y'all, they're doctors. You're gonna see people shirtless. It's fine.
So after this, too, there was the introduction of Captain Pratt.
Oh, is that his actual name? I had no idea what this man's name was.
Yeah, so he's another one he is military intelligence, and Flagg is CIA, which is government intelligence. And for some reason, they're like knocking heads. I really don't
get it out, spy versus spy style.
Yeah, so Pratt is there. And he doesn't want Flagg to know that he is there with military intelligence. So we come to find out that he is Trapper's friend and stuff like that. I really just don't understand why Pratt is there. Also, he explained it, but it was a lot of, like, government mumbo jumbo of like, oh, this happens all the time during like near appropriations time, which is a government thing. I don't really understand. I don't know what's going on here.
This is a thing that added to my theory of these men are just insane and don't actually work for anyone. Because nothing is actually clear. Their story changes every time they're introduced. It was just a wild ride of pure, like, zany spy comedy where none of it made sense. There are no actual motivations. It's just two people who don't know anything explaining things to other people and expecting them to understand.
And you know what? I feel like Hawkeye and Trapper were kind of reflecting how the audience must have been feeling because they were also really confused. The Hawkeye especially, he was just like, Yankee Doodle, like, I don't know what's going on. It was very funny.
Hawkeye's probably like, man, I hope next week I get a story where like something actually happens to me and I have like an emotional core.
Yeah, it was all like pretty zany. I feel like that's the only way I can really explain it. It's just like this zany like
this is a madcap adventure. And by the way, I don't know if we should say this for trivia or whatever, but this is directed by Larry Gelbart. This is directorial debut. I'm like, wow. They're like, let's have the creator of the show direct an episode and also have it be the one that makes the least sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't catch who wrote this, but I was just like, guys, like, what were you on when you wrote this?
It was Larry Gelbart and Lawrence Marks, directed by Larry Gelbart. That started, it was like, ooh, we're going to have like a good episode. We're going to have an episode with a lot of commentary, a lot of comedy, good emotional core. Like these guys, they're running the show. They're directing the episode. It's going to be like a great finale. And then it was just a spy versus spy cartoon that took place inside of MASH. And I was like, what is happening? I don't understand.
Maybe they were just burnt out by the end of the season. They were just like, we got to end this season. So
let's just make a wacky thing that only makes sense to us. Have these two guys give like these insane performances and just go out.
So I did think it was really funny, though, that eventually Colonel Flagg finds out that Pratt is there and he's like trying to, you know, he's whatever. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. He's like, he's there to spy on me. It's okay. And so he has his broken arm still, and Hawkeye is going to X-ray. Hawkeye is going to X-ray his arm to make sure it's setting properly. And he's like, oh, I have to stay in your camp. You have to give me a medical excuse. And Hawkeye's like, no, like, your arm is fine. You have to get out of here. And so Colonel Flagg takes the X-ray machine and smashes it on his arm, breaking his cast and his arm again. And Hawkeye was just like, okay, well, that's your medical excuse, I guess. And it was just so funny because he just did not react at all.
Hawkeye's reaction was the funniest part of this episode. That Colonel Flagg does this insane thing, this insane, like, slapstick comedy injury. And then it cuts to Alan Alda's face, and he's just like, okay, this is happening. Just no like actual like response to him. Hilarious. I laughed so hard. It was amazing.
Alan Alda's face in this scene was just too funny. If you haven't seen it yet and you're listening to this episode, go back and watch this scene because it's beautiful. It's so well done. Alan Alda deserves every award for just this scene.
It felt like they made Alan Alda like react in different takes, like do big, like, what are you doing reactions? And then they just filmed one where he didn't react at all. And they're like, let's use that one. That would be the funniest one.
It was really good. I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah.
So
God, I'm so happy that you're the one, like, going through this episode and explaining the plot. If I had to do that, I would lose my mind.
You know, it was hard. My notes were like, I usually have at least 2 pages of handwritten notes. I had half a page. No joke, half a page. I was like, this is ridiculous. Anyway, I do think it was in this scene that Hawkeye and Trapper put their plot into motion of like, hey, these guys are really stupid. We should mess with them.
Yeah.
So for some reason, in Frank's personnel file, he like keeps notes of everybody who's quote unquote un-American. So Hawkeye and Trapper put Pratt on to Frank and say, hey, listen, like, he puts it on really thick for this patriotism. You should maybe look into him and see if he's like doing anything un-American. So they know that Colonel Flagg, they set radar up to eavesdrop and figure out what Colonel Flagg is doing. So they put in Frank's file for Colonel Flagg to see that he's like a communist sympathizer. And then they switch out the files real fast when Pratt is going to look at it to make it seem that Frank is a Nazi sympathizer. And so at the end scene, it all culminates and they're going to arrest Frank for these two different, like, ultra right wing and ultra left wing, like, you know, un-American activity. And it's just like, wait a minute. And Frank is just so confused. I kind of felt bad for Frank here because he was just like, wait a minute, I'm not a communist or a Nazi.
He was like us. He was just like, I have no idea what's happening. One person's telling me that I did laundry for the KKK. Other people are saying that, like, I went to a ballet in Russia, in, like, Tokyo. I had no idea what that was, like, a crime about. Even Frank was like, what's wrong with going to a ballet? And Pratt and or Flagg, I have no idea which, said some weird, like, spy nonsense.
Yeah, Flagg was like, yeah, the ballet is how it starts, and then you're dancing all over Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Just like, what is going on? This was the funniest scene to me, because it was just so ridiculous.
This made this whole episode kind of worth it, because it's just so absurd. Like, this is where the pitch of these two guys were, like, actually kind of, like, perfect. Where, like, okay, this is just full-on wacky. And then, like, Hawkeye and Trapper come in and, like, call them out, being like, listen, you two idiots, like, you're not actually doing anything. You're leaking military secrets. There isn't anybody here to spy on. Please leave.
Yeah.
And then they're like, yeah, you're right. Thank you for showing us a good time.
It was so funny because Hawkeye and Trapper admit, you know, hey, listen, we got one over on you guys who are supposed to be the experts in, like, keeping secrets and military intelligence and stuff like that. It was us, by the way. And then Pratt, who is supposed to be Trapper's friend, was just like, haha, hey, Trapper, you're right. That's so funny. Like, you got one. You got me. And then they just leave.
Yeah.
That's it.
Because they threatened to arrest them for doctoring, like, documents. But then, like, Hawkeye and Trapper give this really, like, half-assed excuse of, like, you can't arrest us. We're here until the end of the war. I'm like, that's not how that works. If you, like, interfered with military intelligence, they would arrest you. But, like, whatever. These guys are dumb. I think the message of this episode was that they're dumb and don't know what they're doing.
No, I think that you're right, because honestly, if you think about it, like, Flagg and Pratt are on the same side. They're both working for the American side of this war. So why are they butting heads and causing so much trouble in this camp and not letting the doctors do their job? Which, by the way, I felt like a little bit of subtle commentary, like definitely not anything real, but Henry, Hawkeye, and Trapper all said, like, why are these idiots poking around? Like, we're trying to save lives here. Can they just go away? And eventually they did go away.
By the way, this is kind of tangential because we're at the end of the episode, but I had no idea what he was trying to blackmail Henry with. Was that like he cheated on his wife or something and there was like spy cameras around the hotel room?
Yeah, so Pratt went into Henry's office and was like, hey, listen, I'm here to run counterintelligence on the CIA agent who's here poking around. And Henry's like, listen, we're a MASH unit, we're a hospital, like, you guys need to go away. And Pratt is like, hey, listen, look at this file I have on you about, like, we've recorded your extramarital affairs, and we know that you are a serial cheater. And it just, like, was kind of gross. First of all, gross that Henry is apparently cheats on his wife a lot.
Yeah, not only in Korea.
Yeah, and gross that he was, like, being blackmailed about it. It was like, what is this? This is not
what motel
cool.
room did they go to that the electric blanket was a microphone? And then and then Henry was like, oh my god, I knew it. It was so weird.
It was a very, like, weird. This episode was very strange. This is a weird episode.
Like I said, this is a crossover episode with another show that doesn't exist, where it plays by their rules, not necessarily MASH's rules.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I felt like this might have been a backdoor pilot for some zany American military show where Colonel Flagg and Captain Pratt are always like, yeah. One highlight of this episode was Margaret's hair. It looked very pretty. She looked great in this episode. 10 out of 10, Margaret.
Great, Margaret. Also, gotta shout out again Hawkeye and Trapper's outfits. I love the Hawaiian shirt and cowboy hat that Hawkeye had on. And for most of the episode, Trapper had like this basketball like jersey tank top thing.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Sleeveless shirt. I was like, this is a weird outfit for him to be wearing right now, but like he's pulling it off. He looks great. Love to see that.
And Hawkeye and Trapper's contrasting robes. Like Hawkeye was in his red robe and Trapper was in his yellow robe, and it just aesthetically very pleasing. Loved that so much.
Great costuming. Let's nominate this for an Emmy.
One last scene though, I thought it was really interesting. I guess not interesting, but funny. The ending scene with Flagg doing the voiceover and kind of just saying that each of the characters in the camp needed to be watched further, indicating that he was coming back. And there were pictures of all of the cast members, and Hawkeye and Trapper were shown in their gorilla suits again, and that was amazing. That was amazing.
I love seeing that like bit of continuity. That is their file photo in the context of this episode of like, this is what the government has on them. And I thought it was really funny. The must continue to be watched was a little meta of like, see you next season.
Yeah, it was just a great way to round out the episode. I really liked that. And I thought that I think that in last season's season finale, they did not the exact same thing, but they had the announcer kind of on and saying, you know, Alan Alda, Hawkeye and stuff like that. And that kind of continued into this season, a little bit less so because they didn't say the actors' names. But I do like how they kind of give the main cast that one last, like, okay, here they are in the final scene.
So from that, with how insane this episode was, do you have any trivia for us?
So I have some trivia about the guest stars of this episode. So Edward Winter played Colonel Sam Flagg, and he is probably best known for his role as Colonel Flagg because he's just so there throughout the entire just series of MASH. He started his acting career in theater, though, with the Oregon Shakespeare Company. He then went on to be pretty successful on Broadway, and he received a Tony nomination for Best Supporting Actor for his roles in Cabaret in 1967 and Promises, Promises in 1969. Isn't that cool?
Oh, that's probably where I know the name Edward Winter from, because I'm familiar with like the production history of Cabaret. But I didn't put that together that like, oh, that's where I know that name from. That's actually really cool.
He went on to guest star on several shows throughout the 70s and 80s, including Alice, Soap, The A-Team, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and he also guest appeared on the MASH spinoff After MASH. So that's cool.
Really? As Colonel Flagg?
Yeah. I think so, yeah. It didn't. Wow. When I was looking it up, it didn't specify, but I do think Colonel Flagg, yeah.
Oh man, I'm so interested to see some of that show at some point, because I know that people do not like it, and I'm just like, okay, let's see what happens here.
He also starred in the drama show Project UFO on NBC. In the 90s, he guest appeared on shows like The Golden Girls and Seinfeld, and in his later career, he did a lot of voice acting for children's shows, including, most notably for us, The Angry Beavers.
Nice! Oh my god.
The best. Winter passed away in 2001 from complications of Parkinson's disease, unfortunately. And also I have trivia on Billy Fletcher, who played Captain Vinnie Pratt. So he appeared as a guest star on the soap opera The Doctors, which, funnily enough, my grandmother loved that soap opera. He also guest starred on shows like Bonanza, Ironside, Wonder Woman, The $6 Million Man, and Charlie's Angels, among many others, and Fletcher also passed away in 2013.
Sounds like a big action man. That's a lot of action TV shows.
Both of these actors had pretty prolific careers as like guest stars and whatnot on TV shows, so I love that.
And I love their insane energy in this one. Does Pratt ever come back, or no? Is this like a one and done?
No, I don't. He's only in this episode, but I would have liked to see him in other episodes, like Warring with Flagg. Like I said, I want a whole show on this. So, Ethan, do you have any favorite lines from this episode?
Listen, man, I will be honest. I more or less do not. Not that this wasn't a funny episode. It was just I was trying to follow the plot.
Yeah, I understand. I get it. I really only had one line. It was when Raider was telling all of them that Flag was actually a CIA agent. And Frank and Margaret were saying that they were so excited that he was a CIA agent because there was around the MASH unit, they were running low on patriotism because, of course, that's what they care about. And Hawkeye says, Radar, if we're running low, get another order of Yankee Doodle. And I love that. Anytime they reference Yankee Doodle, my favorite.
Mm-hmm. I feel you. So, what do you think of this one? What would you rate it out of 5 martinis?
I gave this one like a 2.5 because definitely not great for me personally. Like, definitely not going to make my top 5. But I also loved the introduction of the Colonel Flag character because I know what he does in the future, and that to me made it a little bit better.
Yeah, I have to agree. I'm going a little higher than you, as usual. I'm giving this a 3 out of 5, entirely for the insane cast breaking bit. That was so genuinely hilarious to me that, like, I cannot give this episode anything lower than a nice 3 out of 5.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I understand. I get it. 3 was also written down for me, but I am going to go 2.5 because of just how, like, strange
confusing
this episode
was.
Yes. So, like we said, we're at the end of this season, and I do have some season 2 trivia overall.
Oh, let's go.
So, we had mentioned this at the beginning of the season, but season 2 was moved to a better time slot at 8:30 right after All in the Family, and this proved to really make a difference for the show's rating and stuff like that. So, MASH won the Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series. Alan Alda also won for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series and Actor of the Year. Gary Berghoff, McLean Stevenson, and Loretta Swit were all nominated for Supporting Actor Role Awards, and Stanford Tischler and Fred Berger were nominated for Outstanding Editing of this season. So I thought, overall, pretty good.
Yeah, that's a lot of, like, primary awards. That's really great. And it's interesting that All in the Family led into them. I don't know a lot about All in the Family, but it feels like it feels like another, like, commentary show where, like, this is a lot about, like, real world events and, like, people. So it's interesting that they kind of had back-to-back doses of different things to say about America at the time.
Yeah, I think that was really interesting. Like, the whole shtick, I guess, of All in the Family is Archie Bunker just, like, not allowing himself to kind of change with the times, and his wife and daughter and son-in-law all being like, Dad, you gotta change with the times, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then to have MASH right after that of just like, hey, America, look at this, like kind of like putting up a mirror to the American audience. Very interesting, very fun, made for great TV. I'd love to marathon All in the Family and MASH back to back. Sounds like a perfect day to me. So, Ethan, what would you give this season? What rating would you give it overall?
Honestly, this was like a really great season. I think last season I gave the season 1 like a 4 out of 5 or maybe 3.5. Pretty solid enough, you know. That was our first martini rating ever. Let's celebrate end of martini ratings once again. But I think I might have to go really high and say this is like a 4.5 season. There are only like a handful of episodes where it's like, nah, that's not good. And they were not as bad as like the bad episodes of season 1. Like, the gold episode is, like, actual trash. Like, I don't like thinking about that episode, but, like, I will rewatch, like, Henry in Love or Dear Dad 3 and be, like, okay with it if I had to, you know?
I am on the same page as you. I gave this season a 4.5 out of 5 martinis.
Let's go.
Or, like, I think that we did, like, letter ratings also for last season. I would give this season an A-. Very, very just like solid season.
I agree.
And yeah, I think that overall we feel the exact same about this season. A solid season of TV. Basically no complaints.
Yeah, we had a great buzz going the whole time. We were,
yeah.
not blackout drunk, but you
buzz.
don't want to be blackout drunk all the time. You just want to be feeling it.
Yeah, it was like a night out.
Yeah. All right.
So, just to wrap up, we'd like to give thanks to Jacob Virabalco for being our technical consultant, Melissa, my sister, for cover art, and of course our listeners. Thank you so much. Our music, social media, and contacts for the show are linked in the description as always. And we'll be taking a short hiatus between seasons, so join us on December 9th for Season 3 of MASHmouth. Until then, break your arm twice with an X-ray machine. Goodbye, farewell, and amen.
Bye, everyone.